In Jackson, Mississippi, school drop-off isn't just for the kids. It's also for the water. The entire city is facing a boil water notice, again.
We're told, don't wash your hair with the water, don't brush your teeth with the water.
Lakeisha Galilan worries about her 8-year-old.
Is she going to walk over to a water fountain and drink from that water fountain?
To be safe, signs are up at the middle school. They've been there a long time.
You can't remember a time when the kids could use the water fountains in the school?
I can't remember. I honestly can't remember.
George Stewart has taught here for 6 years, a predominantly black, low-income school. On top of all the other challenges, water quality and water pressure are a constant battle.
At one point, we had to shut down for about 2 weeks.
When?
This was maybe a year or two ago.
In the middle of the pandemic?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Class went virtual. Kids fell further behind.
We have many students who consider some of our most vulnerable students who virtual learning does not help them at all.
The problem here, like so many other places, is failing infrastructure.
This is one of 2 water treatment facilities in Jackson, and the one largely to blame for the most recent citywide boil water notice. And officials still can't tell people when the water will be safe to drink again.
In 2020, an EPA report cited a long list of problems with the water system, including failure to replace lead pipes, faulty monitoring equipment, inadequate staffing.
There's been a failure to recognize this as a unified problem, as a problem both on the state and even at times the federal level, understanding that we lived in an aging America.
Shokwe Antar Lumumba is Jackson's mayor.
Good evening and welcome everyone to the National Infrastructure Bank Coalition's Thursday night event, U.S. at the Crossroads, an American system of industrial recovery, or Fed Chair Powell's nightmare recession. For decades, the driver of the U.S. economy has been consumer spending. Our policies, our taxation have resulted in driving manufacturing overseas in order to get the lowest possible price per unit. Spending on our infrastructure has languished, and now with the global supply chain shortage, we are seeing the consequences. Not enough production on the supply side, an inability to manufacture here in the U.S., industry consolidation, and rampant inflation. Now the Fed says they have an answer for us. They want to raise interest rates, which they are doing, to cut down on consumer demand. But we think there's another solution. And that's what we want to explore this evening in the presentations from our speakers, is what our economy would look like if we pivoted to making the investment in infrastructure across our country. My name's Julie Olson. I'll be your moderator this evening. And with that, I would like to go right to our speakers. We've got quite a lineup this evening, and I'm sure you'll find their presentations very interesting. So why don't we go to the first one on our list, Alfecca Mutardi, who's a former senior economist with the International Monetary Fund. Alfecca, tell us about the Infrastructure Bank.
Thank you very much, Julie, and thank you to all of you for joining us this evening. My name is Alfecca Mutardi. I'm a macroeconomist with the Coalition for a National Infrastructure Bank. I'd like to give you a quick rundown on how the bank works, because we have some new callers on this call this evening who are not quite familiar with it. So my apologies to those who have already heard this. And then I'd like to open up with a little bit of taking a peek at where we are with the economy and money policy and what the outlook is and what our state of infrastructure is to set up for other speakers who are going to talk about this as well. So to get started, we have a bill in Congress, of course, as you know, H.R. 3339. And look at this. We're now up to 17 co-sponsor. Hallelujah. And thank you to all of the legislators, the activists, everybody across the country who has been talking doggedly with their members of Congress to get them signed on board. This methodology really works. We've added new co-sponsors in California, Michigan, and elsewhere. And so we're actively looking to increase this number of co-sponsors and get on board Republicans and Democrats alike. So this is the way the National Infrastructure Bank works. It is modeled on the earlier 4 banks that came before it. This is not a new idea. It's worked well in our nation's past under very poor economic circumstances like we're entering into today. And it really is a salvation for the country. That started after the American Revolutionary War with Alexander Hamilton and George Washington. and went through the Reconstruction Finance Corporation of FDR. These banks are not around any longer. They had a 20-year sunset clause, but they were very successful, built most of our nation's infrastructure. So our proposal for a fifth bank is modeled on the other earlier four. Quickly, it is capitalized by going to the private sector, asking them to sell in treasuries they are holding in exchange for preferred stock. That makes these investors silent partners. They get paid a little bit extra in the process, and that extra stream of money comes out of the earnings from the NIB's loans. This bank is self-sufficient. It doesn't require big money from budgets to get it started or subsidize its operations. And then it goes on to work just like a commercial bank. The capital sits on the bank's books, acts like a rainy day fund. The bank gives out loans. When it gives out a loan, it actually creates a deposit. And when you create an extra deposit like that, you're creating money. Commercial banks created 90% of our nation's money supply, uses cash on hand to move money out of that newly created deposit through the rest of the banking system. Loans are very advantageous, low-cost interest rates for borrowers. Borrowers would be state and local governments, any public entity that owns a piece of public infrastructure, be it a road, a bridge, a school, can come in directly for an improvement loan from the NIB. We cover $5 trillion in projects. Half of this estimation of need came from the American Society of Civil Engineers, who keep track of these things. They've noted that we have this big, huge backlog because we have not financed infrastructure over so many years. We have a big backlog, and we need trillions of dollars to repair transportation systems, water systems, upgrade our electric power grid. We also need a complete high-speed rail network all across the country to improve our transportation. We put in extra money for that. Also for broadband, affordable housing, 7 million units, and some large-scale water projects to address drought in the Southwest, where we grow half of our nation's food supply. So where do we stand on the economy? This is what's happening. Now, because the Fed over a long period of time has been printing too much money, we now are having high inflation. It's up to 8.5% for the consumer price index, a little bit less than that for a different measure of inflation. But this has really caused a stir. And now the Federal Reserve, who is responsible for the money supply in our country, wants to cut down on demand by soaking back up the money supply. This is because they think that inflation is caused by too much money or demand chasing too few goods or too little supply. So what they're going to do, they believe that workers are the cause of all this, that they have too much money because we have a tight labor market, that they're living, high off the hog. What they're going to do, their policy is to cut back the money supply. It's called quantitative tightening, or QT. They're also going to raise interest rates, and that's going to soak up the money supply so that there's less borrowing and less demand, and that will plunge us into a recession. They're looking to increase broadly unemployment. This is Larry Summers' idea that what we need is to move the unemployment rate from 3.5%, where it currently is, up to maybe 6% per year for the next 5 years. And that high unemployment will wind up cutting wages across the board. This is a completely irresponsible policy. Why? We just got finished spending $7 trillion and raising our national debt by that much. We raised it by 32% to get us out of the COVID recession. And now we're going to plunge ourselves into a new recession. Keep in mind, these higher interest rates will have to be paid by the U.S. government as well. And higher interest rates on the national debt, this increased, it's up to $30.9 trillion now, will really soak up all of our revenues in the budget. We'll have less money left over to spend on other things. This is going to be bad for the fiscal. Also, workers do not have too much money. Real wages declined over the past decade. Look at this. 40% of Americans can't pay their rent or buy food. 1.6 million Americans are still out of the workforce compared to before COVID. Why? Because they can't afford to work. Transportation costs too much. Child care and elder care costs too much. They also, many of them have long COVID. The people that have too much money on their hands are the top 10% of income earners. We need to tax them if we're really going to soak up this extra demand. Demand suppression does nothing to increase the supply of goods. That's the other side of the inflation question. Powell admits that quantitative tightening will not lower food or gas prices. So what is the point in doing it with a sledgehammer and running our economy into a recession? Also, this policy totally ignores the devastating effect of a recession that has on businesses and banks. 32% of small businesses today say they can't pay their rent. Corporations that are troubled corporations that are adding debt onto debt. These are called junk bonds. That amount of debt has doubled over the last decade to 1.5 trillion. It's on the books of banks, and chunks of it are becoming overdue right now, even before we go into a recession. That will help if they can't pay their loans back. That will help hit the banking sector. Falling stock prices. Setting up margin calls, hugely interleveraged mega banks sitting on $200 trillion of derivatives. All these are ticking time bombs that could set off a new financial crisis. So that's the economy side. Where are we on the infrastructure side? Also not looking good. Jackson, Mississippi, we're going to have speakers talk about this. Jackson, Mississippi's water disaster developed over decades because there was not enough money in budgets to fix it. Jackson is in the news, but we have many other cities across the nation, from Baltimore all the way over to Honolulu, Hawaii, that have poor drinking water, quality water problems that need to be fixed right away. Los Angeles, California, facing extreme homelessness and housing insecurity for decades also. The nation's worst traffic congestion. Record heat this summer, and record heat is straining, and air conditioning is straining their electric power grid, and they may be facing rolling blackouts. We're entering into our third year of drought and water cutbacks in the Southwest, where we grow half of our nation's food supply. Add to that, we've had record rainstorms and wildfires destroying costly infrastructure. Here's a picture of a farmer in Central California watching as a tractor destroys his 70-acre organic asparagus field, which he had to plow under because he had no water to water it with. Pennsylvania townships are selling off utilities to get fast money to plug their budget holes. This is causing rates for these users to go up by 50 to 90%. We were going to have some new information about what's going on with this privatization, blocking it. We still have potholes everywhere. All the roads are not fixed. Washington State, Indiana, and Michigan have the worst pothole problems in the nation. Costs every motorist upwards of $700 a year in repair costs to their cars because of the potholes. Look at this. The infrastructure bipartisan bill that was passed last year gave most of its money for roads and bridges, but compared to what the American Society of Civil Engineers say we need to fix the whole thing, they're only going to provide 14% of the new money that's needed to fix roads and bridges. So what we're told by members of Congress is there's no more money coming from the federal budget for infrastructure. That's it. The bipartisan law was it. We passed the Inflation Reduction Act just recently. It excluded any money for high-speed rail. What we're seeing is those two programs are about all they're going to be for some period of time to come. So what can the National Infrastructure Bank do? Actually, it is a better way to fight inflation, save jobs, and curb a recession. Why? First of all, it's a proven solution. It can lean against a recession in the same manner that a previous bank, the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, did when it leaned against the Great Depression and hired workers who were unemployed. It also lends only into the real sector for infrastructure improvements that really stretch out and oversize their impact on the economy. $5 trillion over 10 years to fix the entire backlog of infrastructure projects. We could start on year one, day one, with shovel-ready projects like the Jackson, Mississippi water problem, the Los Angeles backlog of problems, New Mexico, every place else. We can start with their backlogs of projects. We'll create 25 million new great family-sustaining jobs. We can hire unemployed workers right away, especially low-income workers that need jobs the most. The legislation requires that workers be paid Davis-Bacon wages. Those are almost union level scale wages. And we can ramp up training programs so that workers can earn while they learn. We prevent further food price inflation by increasing water supplies to the Southwest, both from piped water and primary water. We're going to have a speaker about this. We help to resolve other supply chain problems like that occurs at ports, trucking, lack of affordable housing. All of this will grow small businesses. We have a strong climate change benefit because we're putting more rail into the transportation mix and saving on fuel and renewal. We're going to move to renewable agriculture. So the scope and type of spending, that $5 trillion, sharply raises economic growth and productivity. It makes the economy more efficient. Trucks move faster, that kind of thing. That was proven by the Reconstruction Finance Corporation during the Great Depression. So, and we can prevent any meltdown of small and medium businesses and any meltdown of state and local finance revenues that would be caused by a recession. So this complements budgets everywhere, and we can do it all with no new federal spending, taxes, or debt that's needed. This is passable legislation. So let's go ahead and get it done. Thank you.
Thanks. I have one more final question I would like to address to Professor Hockett and Alfeka Mutardi, and that is, once a national infrastructure bank is created, how long will it take for us to start seeing results in the economy? Can you hazard a guess at that, Alfeka or Professor Hockett?
Well, maybe I could take a stab at it first. The bill, as it's constructed at the moment, has an emergency clause in it so that we can get started right away. That is, we won't have to have all of the regulatory framework in place for the bank to actually start giving out loans. We can give out emergency loans. Certainly, we should start with emergency loans for places like Jackson, Mississippi, any place that doesn't have water, for farmers to make sure that our food supply doesn't shrivel up and die. All of these are emergencies right now. We have a whole bunch of bridges that are about to collapse. These things are all on the books. They've been standing on the books for the last 15 or 20 years. We can get started on the projects right away. And all of this will have an impact right away on the economy, because if we're in a recession, if Powell has had his way and we've had, high unemployment after all the excruciating pain we went through after COVID, we can hire people right away to start working on these projects and train and let them earn while they learn in a new family sustaining career. So that should have a really immediate impact on unemployment, on improving worker pay, and getting our growth rates back up to par.
Yeah, I'm with Alfeka on that. I think I'll just echo her. I mean, if you've got a national infrastructure bank that can kind of target places all over the country, and if you say we're going to start where the needs are most urgent and most obvious, where in fact there would be likely to be emergency authority to get to work right away because there's a sort of exigency that we're facing that could actually result in deaths and, sort of serious tolls to human health and the like, then you could see results quite quickly. I mean, right now, of course, Jackson and Flint are quite conspicuous cases. I grew up in New Orleans, and of course, you guys will remember that when Katrina struck in 2005, the Ninth Ward in particular was terribly hard hit. And as usual, it's a part of the city that's that's inhabited largely by groups that have been traditionally discriminated against. In this case, of course, African American folk again. And that was a massive infrastructure failure that resulted in deaths and cataclysm. And it was as though this wasn't the United States, at least not the United States that middle class white folk had always thought that it was, but that non-middle class white folk could have told you it's been sort of all along. If we were looking to all of those areas where we really need to work fast and immediately, we would start seeing immediate results. And, you know, an economist would tell you that you get a lot more bang for your buck, so to speak, in those places too, because there's just so much catching up to do. And then once the sort of hardest hit or the most vulnerable areas begin to look like they're improving and things are getting better and there's less sort of cataclysm all around, then of course by that point we will be able to have geared up to start doing work in areas that are sort of less struck by, you know, less sort of vulnerable to emergency, but that are nevertheless in need of improvement. Say like a LaGuardia Airport in New York, which wasn't exactly an emergency shape, but was just unbelievably bad. So, you know, start with the areas where human life and human health are imperiled. Again, like Jackson and Flint right now, or the Ninth Ward in New Orleans before 2005. And then once you've got all that taken care of, you can start looking at other places where things aren't quite as, you know, kind of lethally dangerous, but that are in really severe need of improvement. And I think we'd start seeing change immediately.
And I'm sure that would be welcome news to municipalities, cities, localities around the country.